Marcus had walked past the broken bench for 3 months before he finally understood what his father had been trying to teach him. It sat at the corner of Willow Street and Third, one slat missing, another cracked down the middle, paint peeling in grey curls. People avoided it now. Marcus avoided it too, but for different reasons. His father had restored that bench 15 years ago, spent a whole Saturday sanding and painting, while Marcus, then 27 and impatient, had rolled his eyes and asked why he wasted time on things that weren't his problem. His father had just smiled and said, "Someone's going to need this someday." Now his father was gone 6 months, and the bench was dying again. Marcus pulled his jacket tighter against the November wind and kept walking. He had his own problems: a mortgage, a daughter starting college, a job that barely covered both. 3 days later, Marcus saw her, an elderly woman in a thin coat, walking slowly with a cane, looking for somewhere to rest. She approached the bench, hesitated, then kept moving. He watched her shuffle another 2 blocks to the bus stop, breathing hard. That image stayed with him, through his shift, at the hardware store, through dinner, through the late news. That night, he opened the garage and found his father's tools exactly where he'd left them. The sandpaper, the wood stain, the brushes still wrapped in an old t-shirt. Marcus ran his hand over the workbench his father had built. How many things had these hands fixed? How many problems that weren't his own had his father made his business? Marcus had always thought his father was naive, too generous with his time. But standing there, holding a sanding block worn smooth by his father's grip, Marcus felt something shift. Maybe fixing things that weren't broken yet wasn't naive. Maybe it was the whole point. Saturday morning arrived cold and clear. Marcus loaded his truck with supplies he'd bought on his employee discount and drove to Willow Street. He expected to work alone. But when he arrived, his daughter Claire was waiting, holding 2 cups of coffee. "Mum told me where you'd be," she said. Marcus felt his throat tighten. Claire handed him a coffee and picked up a sanding block without being asked. They worked in comfortable silence, the rhythm familiar, even though they'd never done this together. Claire had been 7 when her grandfather died, old enough to remember his gentleness, young enough to still cry at unexpected moments. "Grandpa used to say something," she said, smoothing a rough edge, "about fixing things." Marcus nodded. He said every repair is a conversation with the future. You're telling someone you haven't met yet that they matter. Claire tested the slat, found it solid, and smiled. "I get it now," she said. Marcus realized he did too. By noon, they'd replaced the broken slats and sanded everything smooth. Marcus opened the can of stain, the same color his father had used, a warm cedar tone, and began to brush it on. Each stroke felt like a meditation. He thought about all the times his father had done this, fixed Mrs. Chen's porch railing, rebuilt the playground equipment at the park, repaired the church steps, never asking for payment, never asking for recognition, just doing the work because it needed doing. Marcus had spent so many years thinking his father's way was impractical, that you had to look out for yourself first. That generosity was something you could afford only after you'd secured everything else. But watching the wood grain emerge under the stain, Marcus understood that his father had been securing something else entirely. Not comfort, not safety, connection, legacy. The knowledge that his hands had made the world slightly softer for strangers. They finished as the sun began to set, the bench glowing in the golden light. Marcus stood back and examined their work. It wasn't perfect. There was a slight gap where one board met another, a drip of stain he'd missed, but it was solid. It would hold. Claire took a photo with her phone, then surprised him by sitting down and patting the space beside her. Marcus sat. The bench held them both. "You know what I'm going to do?" Claire said. "I'm going to bring my roommate here next semester. She's studying urban planning. I want to show her this and tell her about Grandpa, about fixing things that aren't yours." Marcus felt something break open in his chest, something that had been locked tight since the funeral. His father wasn't gone. He was here, in this bench, in Claire's understanding, in Marcus's hands. Death had taken his father's body, but not his method, not his message. That, Marcus realized, was something you could carry forward. Spring came, and Marcus found himself noticing other things: a loose railing at the library, a wobbly table at the community center, a squeaky door at his daughter's old elementary school. One Saturday became 2, then 4. Claire joined him when she was home from college, and sometimes neighbors stopped to watch, then to help. An older man brought lemonade. A teenager handed Marcus a screwdriver he needed. No one asked why he did it. Maybe they understood, or maybe they just recognized the language his father had spoken. The quiet grammar of care, the syntax of showing up. Marcus still had his mortgage and his job and all his own problems, but now he also had this: his father's tool bag, his father's purpose, his father's proof that you don't disappear when you die if you've taught someone else how to build. The bench on Willow Street still sits there, solid and waiting. A conversation with the future that will never end.